You wouldn't have a problem if Kamala Harris promoted a bail fund for Jeffrey Epstein.
No, not on principle.
Well, okay, so
I wanted to specifically talk about Kamala Harris, and I want to talk about the bail fund because I noticed you bring this up in a lot of January 6th discussions, and I want to like explore it a little bit. I'm not interested in having like a blood sports debate. I
Sure.
just kind of want to chat, right? So, what is your objection to Kamala Harris promoting a bail fund?
promoting a bail fund when it came specifically to Minneapolis?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's the Michigan Freedom,
Yes.
Minnesota Freedom Fund.
Yes.
Yeah.
My objection to that is twofold. The first objection is on face value before anything else happens, just looking at the situation in a vacuum, that when we see people that are rioting, attacking police, and burning down a police station, and a senator at that point, and then would be vice presidential candidate and now vice president and presidential candidate, immediately suggests promoting a bail fund for those people, it seems to send the message that this sort of violence that's occurring, which we would then see was occurring on a nightly basis for months around this country, is being implicitly encouraged or ignored by potentially powerful people in our politics. And then when you take a look at it outside that vacuum and you see just how forceful the same people that agreed with her, didn't think that was a problem, went after people on the right in the few incidences when we saw political violence from them, particularly Donald Trump being engaged in an insurrection when it came to January 6th or things that occurred in Charlottesville, it really shows a dichotomy in how our narratives are set up and how our legal system approaches these things. The violence that occurred in the Summer of Love with George Floyd was far more prolific, was worse because it was not just targeted at state institutions, but was also targeted at private institutions and private people's homes and businesses, which is worse. It was more expansive in that it happened in more places. It lasted much longer. It caused much more damage. It was more damaging to more people's lives, and it was supported by people in powerful institutions at far greater numbers. And yet it's treated almost completely inversely to any instance that we see of right-wing violence, such as Charlottesville or January 6th. The FBI seems to treat one with kid gloves, and we end up seeing people getting slaps on the wrist or even getting settlements from cities as these fires raged on and attacks raged on and bail funds were promoted by people like Kamala Harris. Meanwhile, everyone remotely connected to January 6th is being investigated to the fullest extent of the law in the largest FBI investigation in history. So my objection to it is twofold. That one, in a vacuum at face value, it showed that the Democratic Party and powerful politicians within it are basically tacitly giving approval to the actions that were occurring. And second, given how we've seen people treated, such as Donald Trump with the lawfare against him and with sort of just the narrative against him with January 6th, what Kamala Harris did was far, far worse than what Trump was accused of doing.
Okay. So I want to set aside the double standard because that's usually the context that it comes up in. So I think we first have to show that like the bail fund was a bad thing, right? Mm-hmm. So I want to read to you the tweet, which says, if you're able to, chip in now to the Minnesota Freedom Fund to help post bail for those protesting on the ground in Minnesota. Mm-hmm. So my next question is, do you think she was being disingenuous about the people she wants to support, or do you think she was being ignorant about what the bail fund might lead to?
What type of people need? What type of people need bail? Do protesters need bail? If I go protest, right? Those that were arrested. So the very nature that this wasn't a, hey, here's a fund to help provide food from the people that are out there protesting, right? If that's the case, I could see making the argument, look, she's not talking about the people that were arrested in this violent attack on a police precinct. She's just saying in general, there are people out there that are peacefully and patriotically protesting what they see as systemic racism in law enforcement and the specific treatment of George Floyd. And she's trying to make their protest easier, trying to get resources to them to make sure that they have the resources to be out there, whether it be water supplies, food, things like that. That'd be a different argument. Now, there's still potential problems of like, but if you're promoting organizations that you see committing violence at the time, and you're not specifically saying like, but you know, the violence was despicable, etc., it seems that you're giving tacit approval. But when you're promoting a bail fund, that's clearly the people that were arrested. And what you saw was literally an attack on law enforcement. And by the way, we know that people died that night. There was at least one body that they found in a burned down building that they found weeks later. Mm-hmm. So to promote a bail fund for people that were arrested, what implication did you take from that? That she knew that that bail fund was only going to the people that were arrested unjustly?
Yeah, so I will see it. I did a little bit of research, and the bail fund doesn't seem to make any discretion on who receives funds, right? If someone petitions for bail from the bail fund, they will more than likely get it. So I totally get that is the case, and that could be a little troubling there.
A little?
I guess...
You don't think that's a big deal? What I mean, I'll ask you honestly. It seems that you somewhat disagree. Yeah. What's your interpretation? What do you think Kamala was thinking? Let's put it in the... You tell me if this is steelmanning her position in the best way. She's thinking, these fucking cops arrested unjustly a bunch of people that night. That's what she's thinking, right? That's the best case scenario for her. Yeah, that's horseshit. Yeah. That's a horseshit opinion. When you see police being attacked like that... Imagine, do you think January 6th was a big deal? I know you don't want to talk about the double standard, but just if you could, humor me for a minute.
Okay. Yeah, short answer, yes, I think it was a big deal.
If Donald Trump came out the day after January 6th and said, I'm promoting a bail fund for the people that were arrested January 6th, would you have said, oh, clearly he's talking about the people that were unjustly arrested? Would you have given him that benefit of the doubt?
I think so.
No, you wouldn't have.
Rob, please don't tell me what I would think in a hypothetical situation.
Let me say this. Fair enough. Have you protested the arrest of any of the January 6 people that have been arrested?
Have I protested the arrest?
So there were thousands of people. There are thousands of people. Do you think they all deserved it?
Deserved to be arrested?
And charged and convicted. Okay. But you're unaware.
Well, if they were convicted, they probably deserved it, right?
The conviction rate's almost 100%. So you haven't really looked into that or spoke about that, but what you're trying to tell me is if Trump would have immediately promoted a bail fund, that you would have given him the benefit of the doubt and say, I assume some of these people were arrested unjustly, and so therefore I'm okay with Trump promoting this bail fund.
I guess to me, it doesn't matter whether they were arrested justly or unjustly. I know you know this, but I just want to ask to clarify. What is bail? Can you explain that to me?
Yeah, bail is sort of a placeholder that's used to get you out of prison so you have incentive not to flee so that you could get out and prepare for your defense until you have your day in court.
Sure. Do you see any problem with that as a general concept?
It depends on the specific crime, but as a general concept, no. For example, if I get arrested and I'm being arraigned on some white-collar crime, there's not a fear that I'm going to go out and be a maniac and murder people, so no problem. If I'm arrested for rape or child abuse or some crime that implies that I might go out and commit heinous acts against other people, maybe bail should not be offered. But the specifics of it obviously set aside. Yeah, in general, I understand that there's a use for that concept. The problem I have is, even if I say, which I don't believe this, I'm just trying to be honest with you. I don't believe that had Trump done, if you're someone who's focused heavily on January 6th, let me ask you one more question about this. Do you think when Trump said fight like hell, etc., that was him engaging in an insurrection, that he was telling people to be violent?
No. I think it's murky because of what happened afterwards. I think if nothing had happened, it would be easy to say, no, of course he didn't do that. I think the fact that he called people there, he used provocative language, let's say, and then there was violence, it gets a little dicey there, right? We don't know what his motivations were. He probably didn't want there to be as much violence as there was.
But this is why I have trouble believing you when I give the bail fund scenario is this. Because if you're like, well, my calculus has changed given that what we saw afterwards, right? So you're saying if he said fight like hell and then there was no violence, then you would have said, yeah, he probably didn't mean commit physical violence, right? But given that there was violence, now you're like, well, now that we see there was violence, but you would concede, I think, that, well, if Trump, in that first scenario where there wasn't violence and you say, well, clearly Trump didn't imply violence, his rationale in that moment when he's saying fight like hell, he doesn't know if the violence is going to occur. Hell, even if he wants it, he's not 100% proof positive it'll happen. So in both scenarios, this is sort of like Schrodinger's,
I agree.
Right? So
it's hard to read his mind.
Right.
For sure. Yeah,
so given that your calculus changes because you now know the violence occurred, I find it very difficult to believe if he then takes actions after he knew the violence occurred, such as promoting a bail fund the next day, that you would have said, I'm okay with that. If you're possibly saying fight like hell was him encouraging the violence, I don't know how you would then go on to say, but if he gave a bail fund to people that were arrested in part for violence on January 6th, I wouldn't have a problem with it. I just have a difficult time believing you.
Let me give my rationale. In the United States of America, people are innocent until they are proven guilty in a court of law. If a judge has granted bail to a defendant, then the judge has determined that they are not a flight risk or they're not at risk of committing further crimes. So as far as I see it, any bail fund is just engaging with the system as it's meant to be engaged with. Right?
I'll say I disagree when it comes to the so hypothetically then, right? Mm-hmm. You wouldn't have a problem if Kamala Harris promoted a bail fund for Jeffrey Epstein.
No. Not on principle.
Well, okay, so I'll say this. I'm just being honest. I don't believe you when it comes to the specific scenario of Trump if he had promoted a bail fund, given that you're questioning whether or not, given that we saw violence occurred when he said fight like hell, that meant he engaged in the insurrection. I don't believe you that you would have said, nope, you're totally fine with him promoting a bail fund. But for the sake of argument, let's say I can't prove anything, so fair enough. Will you at least acknowledge this? Will you at least acknowledge this, that clearly the vast majority of Democrats, including those that push lawfare against Trump, saying that he engaged in an insurrection, would have used the fact that he promoted a bail fund for them as evidence that he supported what they did?
Yeah, maybe.
Clearly. Not maybe. That's absolutely true.
It's hard to again guess people's motivations in a hypothetical scenario, right?
But you're right. There is this sort of abstract, you could never 100% know what people were thinking, but it almost leads to sort of an intellectual nihilism if you take that to the extent of we could never know what anyone was thinking at any point, and you can't make obvious logical implications of what would have happened. Every one of us know, everyone in this chat knows, every left-winger knows, every right-winger knows, had Trump came out the day after January 6th and promoted a bail fund, the Democrats would have fucking been howling. They would have jumped all over it. The people like Colorado that tried to keep him off the court would have included that in the indictment, or to keep him off the ballot would have included in the indictment. Clearly, he was okay with the actions because he then tried to help them by promoting a bail fund. You know that. I know you know that. You're not a dumb person.
Okay, that's probably true. Yeah.
Okay.
That's probably true.
Well, so then now you understand then why people on the other side would feel the same way about Kamala Harris.
I'm not concerned with other people. I'm concerned with you.
Well,
I want to know your objection to it.
Well,
and it sounds like you've told me, right? And again, my rationale is that if bail exists, if a judge has determined that a defendant qualifies for bail, then a charity coming together and paying that bail, I don't really object to that, right?
Well, here's the problem, right? Here, I'll go further now, taking the comparison to January 6th. So just looking at this in a vacuum. The problem is, once more, if we saw that Kamala Harris was randomly promoting bail funds all the time for people on the right, people on the left, people that were accused of like non-political crimes, white people, black people, people in the inner city, people in rural America, then it's a case to be made. It's like, listen, this is well within her character. She's promoted these bail funds because she believes in the system and that you're innocent until proven guilty, and that if the judge grants bail, that you're not a flight risk, and they're entitled to those sort of legal protections that anyone should be. Fair enough. But if you're only promoting it in unique instances where people are committing political violence that sort of align with political messaging that you have, and that's the only time that you're promoting the bail fund, it seems to me that there is something unique about that that's about what that event was that those people were arrested for. And seeing as how we saw so much lip service being played to Black Lives Matter, it seems to me that it becomes tenuous at best to imply that when we're, again, talking about people that were arrested in an act of domestic, I mean, use the word you want, insurrection, domestic terrorism, whatever word that people want to use. The word doesn't matter to me. Like, they burned down a fucking police station. People died, and people were arrested, and you're promoting a bail fund because She did it because Black Lives Matter. That's why she did it, right? And it seems to me that that is a clear endorsement of that message, which led to that violence that day. The people that were arrested that day. And to try to separate that out and say, no, this was just some sort of, her statement on a legal belief on the importance of bail. I'm sorry, I don't believe that we could take out the actions of that day, seeing as how this was sort of a unique bail fund that she promoted. I think that there's a reason that this was one of the unique ones that she promoted. I
agree. And I think the implication is that a lot of people were maybe unjustly arrested, right? And that's a whole different discussion. So if you want to assume that's not true, then I totally understand your objection. So,
but again, I just maybe true, and maybe right. If you're a politician that's like, hey, I'm willing to give that benefit of the doubt in all cases, so be it. But that's not who Kamala Harris is. Why shouldn't she be held to the same standard she would hold others to? If people had promoted, if Donald Trump came out and promoted a bail fund for January 6th, or Charlottesville, the guy who ran over, that shithead that ran over that woman in Charlottesville, for a fact that Kamala Harris and the entire Democratic Party would have been outraged. And said, they were already lying, saying Trump said Nazis were good people. So they would have been like, oh my God.
Yeah.
And for him to be like, well, I just think that some of those people that were arrested there were, they held him to the standard when he said there were good people and bad people on both sides. Clearly, I'm not talking about the Nazis, the KKK, they're terrible. They said that was him endorsing the Nazis. So had he promoted a bail fund and said, look, let's be honest, there were probably some people there that were unjustly arrested, it would have, exactly what Kamala Harris and the Democrats would have done. And so I'm a big fan of holding people, particularly people in power, to the same standards they would seek to hold to other people. I heavily suspect, and again, can't prove, but heavily suspect that that's the standards you would have employed had Donald Trump done that at Charlottesville or at January 6th, but I can't prove it. So I'm just being honest with you. I suspect that maybe you believe you wouldn't have, but I suspect had it occurred, you would have. But I can't prove it, so I am saying I am almost certain what Kamala Harris and the Democrats would do based on the actions I've seen them take and the majority of the Democrats.
That's a better bet. I think maybe you're thinking that I'm more Democrat than I am, whereas I'm further left, and so.
Well, that's even worse. Well, not worse, I guess. But I think that.
No, what I'm saying is, like, again, innocent till proven guilty. That if you're protesting for civil rights and you get arrested, then the judge grants you bail. Then I'm okay with.
That's the difference. And that's what most people would do this. Like, that's what most people would say. Well, even if they're like, just steal me in your position. I think intuitively, this is what you would think. You would say, well, even though there were certainly bad actors that occurred there that burnt down the police precinct, I think that in general, the cause is a good cause. It's sort of civil rights. It's against systemic racism, whatever. And I think the cause of the people January 6th was bullshit. They were lied to, or they were spewing lies that the election was stolen. And so therefore, you're more sympathetic to the people that were arrested for what you think were good people that got caught up in a day of passion, and maybe some of them were even unjustly arrested, then you wouldn't be that sympathetic when it comes to January 6th. And so therefore,
You're right that I wouldn't be as sympathetic. I think your claim to jump to that is to say, then that means you won't stand on your principles. And with all due respect, you don't know me like that.
That's true. And my initial claim might be egregious in doing that. But when I further hear you say that you think that because violence occurred, that when Trump said fight like hell, that might be evidence that he wanted violence to occur. That's the specific evidence I'm using to say, then if he knew after the fact, because you're clearly putting weight on the fact of, well, now that we know violence occurred, now that changes your calculus as to what fight like hell meant. Even though you're acknowledging that in this Schrodinger sort of format, if violence occurred or not, Trump meant the same thing regardless violence occurred or not.
Let me amend that. A lot of intelligence sources, a lot of media sources predicted that there would be violence, right? So Trump also understood that prediction, right?
Oh, wait. What?
Yeah.
Who predicted violence? Because the FBI didn't. They were denying increased security there. If they predicted violence,
that's a different issue.
Okay, then can you explain that? If it was so obvious that violence was going to occur, then why wasn't the intel agencies, the Capital City Police, but why weren't they prepared? If everybody
Maybe
knew
they
and
wanted
Trump...
violence to occur. I don't know about the security, Rob.
That's
I'm just
interesting.
saying that if you paid attention to media beforehand, there were predictions that there would be violence, right?
Well, shit, they said that all the time.
Maybe it's independent media, you know, but...
okay, but the point still stands that if you say Trump should have known because you heard someone on independent media say it, then the point would stand, why didn't the FBI know? Why didn't they do something about it? This is a greater point.
I think they did know.
Okay, then why do you think they didn't have security?
I don't have an answer to that question.
Well, give me a hypothetical. Just spitball some potential answers. If they knew there was going to be violence, and significant violence, according to them, that in retrospect that are saying that it could have killed Mike Pence, you believe they believe that?
So you're saying if the FBI was making certain advisements, then why wasn't there a higher presence of
if they knew that there was about to be a coup or an insurrection, they knew that the tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people were coming and there was going to be significant violence, why weren't they prepared to defend the Capitol? If they knew the violence was going, because the only plausible explanation
that's a different group, right? The FBI isn't in charge of defending the Capitol, right?
But
so it would have to have to go through the Capitol Police, right? And
that's true. So then wouldn't
right?
the FBI have been doing everything possible to talk to the people that were tasked with defense? It seems that the person
I'm willing to bet they were.
Yeah. No, they weren't. That's not true at all. Okay, then if that's the case, let's say that's the case. Okay. That's not true for two reasons. Or there's two arguments against this, but let's game this out. Let's say that I'm not going to say the second part. Let's say, okay, so the FBI knew, and the FBI told the people in charge. They told the Capital City Police. They told the Sergeant at Arms. Then why didn't those people act? Now they've been told they know there's going to be violence. Why didn't they?
You're asking me for a reason that someone acted unreasonably. I don't know. I don't know, Rob. I don't know why they acted unreasonably.
But listen, it's important because if you're saying we could intuit that Trump knew because everybody knew, right? Then my question is,
there were media reports, there were almost certainly intelligence reports, yeah.
Okay, then if that's true, then why wasn't there adequate protection? You could say it wasn't the FBI fault, it was the Capital City Police fault. Okay, let's say it was their fault.
Capitol Police.
Capitol Police's fault. Yeah. That you're wrong, by the way, but we'll get to that in a second. The question.
Rob, I lived in D.C. for 7 years. I know.
Who was in charge?
No such thing.
Who was in charge of the Capital City Police that day? That was tasked with. What was the name of the person in charge?
I don't know. I'm correcting you.
You lived in D.C. How do you not know?
What I'm correcting you on is there's no such thing as Capital City Police because we don't have a capital city. We have Washington D.C. as our capital. It's pedantic. It doesn't matter. It's just something you say that kind of.
Maybe you're right about that. Let me check.
Because they're not city police, right? They're federal police, so it wouldn't make sense to call them Capital City Police. They're federal agents. That's not important, right?
Okay, so you're. Okay, maybe it's the Capitol Police and not Capital City Police. Anyways, the guy's name was Stephen Sun that was in charge. He testified many times that basically he wasn't briefed whatsoever, that he was requesting National Guard. He was being denied that by the Sergeant at Arms under Nancy Pelosi, that told the Sergeant at Arms under Mitch McConnell that Pelosi would never go for optics to allow the National Guard to be there. He was not getting briefed by the FBI. He did have an intelligence lady underneath him that got one memo from the FBI that suggested some sort of violence, but she never shared that with him. And he was appalled and said that his intelligence resources that he would normally have for just a normal protest that was going to occur at the Capitol was far greater than anything he received on January 6th. And he is absolutely appalled that if there was all this evidence that was collected by all sorts of people such as John Brennan, such as the FBI, why was none of it shared with him when he was the person that was tasked with the defense? So you blaming the Capitol Police, not the Capital City Police, if that's what we're going to call, you blaming them seems to go against the facts that we know. Because Stephen Sund is on record trying to request additional resources both before and during the day of January 6th. So he's the one guy who actually was trying to get more resources. So then the question remains, either one, he's lying and he intentionally allowed this to occur. What would his possible motivation be? Or second, he's telling the truth and the FBI knew that there was about to be an insurrection, but they didn't share that information. They basically kept mum about it. In either scenario, I understand that your position is you can't know why people did something shitty or had some huge mistake or something. I'm asking you, though, just spitball me some potential reasons. Why would that be? If I'm tasked, or I'm an institution that's tasked with protecting our Capitol, and I know there's about to be an insurrection, why would I not protect the Capitol? What are some potential reasons?
Yeah, we're way off course from the Minnesota Freedom Fund.
Right. It almost seems like it almost seems though that because some media outlet said Trump must have known that there was going to be violence was bullshit. That's what it seems like. But hey, thanks for the call. I appreciate it. Think about that. Ruminate on that for a second. If you think the FBI knew, why didn't they prevent it? Think about it.
I'll do some research. Yeah. Thanks.
You do research, but think about it. All right, we'll see you, man. Thanks.